The Bazooka That Wouldn't Fire war story? At 6:30 a.m. on November 8, 1942, American soldiers crouched behind sand dunes at Fidala Beach in Morocco. The air was cold and damp, salt spray from the Mediterranean mixed with smoke from burning vehicles. Most of these men were barely out of basic training. Many were holding weapons they had never seen before yesterday. French Renault tanks were rolling toward them. The weapon in their hands was a strange metal tube about 4.5 feet long. Someone had told them it was called a bazooka. They were told it could stop a tank. That was all the instruction they received. The tanks were 400 yards away and closing. Machine guns echoed across the beach. Naval guns thundered offshore. The tank's tracks churned wet sand as turrets slowly turned, hunting targets. The infantry had no artillery. No anti-tank guns, just rifles, grenades, and this tube. Men shouldered the bazookas. They aimed. They pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. They pulled again. Still nothing. The tanks were now 300 yards away. Engines roared. Gun barrels swung toward them. Soldiers checked wires, reseated rockets, tried to remember anything they'd been told the night before. They yanked the triggers again. Still nothing. Panic spread. Men threw the useless weapons into the sand and ran for cover. Tank machine guns opened up, kicking geysers of sand around them. Only luck and distracted tank commanders kept many alive. What none of them knew was this: they were holding weapons that would fail. American soldiers across North Africa for the next 6 months. Weapons meant to change infantry warfare forever. Weapons that instead left men defenseless. This is the story of how that happened. The bazooka story begins in 1918. A young physicist named Robert Goddard demonstrated a tube-launched rocket to the U.S. Army. The war ended 5 days later. The idea was forgotten. For the next 20 years, the U.S. Army saw no need for man-portable anti-tank weapons. Tanks were slow, unreliable, and rare. Then Germany changed everything. In 1939, German panzer divisions crushed Poland in weeks. In 1940, they shattered France and forced Britain from Europe. American officers watched in alarm. U.S. infantry had almost nothing that could stop modern tanks. The standard anti-tank gun was heavy, slow to deploy, and increasingly useless. Anti-tank grenades required soldiers to get within 30 yards of a tank, essentially suicide. Desperation set in. Major Leslie Skinner of the Ordnance Corps believed rockets were the answer. But there was a problem. The best anti-tank grenade weighed nearly 4 pounds. Too heavy to throw. Too heavy to launch from a rifle. In early 1942, Skinner received a young assistant, Lieutenant Edward Ull, a 24-year-old engineer. Skinner gave him an impossible task: design a way for one soldier to deliver this grenade safely and accurately. Ull struggled for weeks. Then one afternoon at Aberdeen Proving Ground, he noticed something in a scrap pile. A metal tube, about 5 feet long, 60 millimeters in diameter. Exactly the size of the grenade. The idea hit instantly. Put the rocket inside the tube. The tube would direct the exhaust backward, protecting the soldier. They built a prototype from scrap parts. A tube, a wooden stock, 2 batteries, a crude sight made from a bent wire coat hanger. They fired it. It worked. The rocket flew straight. The soldier was unharmed. At a demonstration, the launcher outperformed every competitor. It was accurate, portable, deadly. A general tried it himself and hit the target twice. Within an hour, an order for 5,000 launchers was approved. Someone joked it looked like the instrument played by comedian Bob Burns. The name stuck. Bazooka. Production began immediately. And this is where everything went wrong. The bazooka was rushed into mass production with almost no quality control. The steel tubes varied in diameter. Some were too tight, some too loose. A rocket that stuck could explode inside the tube, killing the operator. The steel itself was substandard. In heat, tubes could rupture. In cold, rockets lost power. The ignition system relied on dry cell batteries. In cold weather, batteries died. In heat, they leaked. In salt air, contacts corroded. The rocket's nose was pointed. At an angle, it could ricochet instead of detonating. And worst of all, no training. None. When Operation Torch began, over 100,000 American troops landed in North Africa. Many saw the bazooka for the first time the night before battle. General Eisenhower learned hours before the invasion that no one had been trained to use it. There was no time to fix it. At Fidala Beach, Safi, Iran, everywhere the same thing happened. Bazookas misfired. Batteries failed. Rockets stuck. Warheads bounced off armor. For 6 months, American infantry learned to fear enemy tanks again. And then came the final insult. The Germans captured bazookas. They studied them, improved them, and created the Panzerschreck, more powerful, more reliable, more deadly. Only then did the U.S. Army finally redesign the weapon. Improved rockets, better ignition, safer tubes, proper training. By late 1943, the bazooka became what it was always meant to be. One soldier, one tube, one tank stopped. But on those beaches in 1942, it was too late. Men had trusted their weapons, and those weapons betrayed them.